But to guide the conversation about how founders discover and pursue their big ideas, I want to introduce David Weekley. He's a programmer, he's a startup founder, he's a mentor, an advisor, an investor, a scuba diver, a helicopter pilot, not necessarily in that order. He flew in from San Francisco to be here, and I think is the only guy leading a panel today. So let's give him a particularly warm welcome, David and his panelists. Where are your panelists? Here they come. I'll let you introduce them, okay, Dave?
So today, we have with us 3 amazing women who have all co-founded companies in very different spaces, all using very innovative approaches. I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Vanessa, the founder of Soltage.
Oh, why did I sit right next to you? Good afternoon, and congratulations to everybody that's now done with your pitch. Now you can relax. My name is Vanessa Stewart. I'm co-founder and chief operating officer of Soltage. We are a renewable energy provider. Do you want to do this now? All right. In a nutshell, what my company does, we started in 2004 or 2005. We provide solar energy to commercial, industrial clients. We do that by slapping a ton of solar panels on their rooftop, big warehouses, manufacturing facilities, but they don't own those panels. We own those panels, and then they just have to agree. They didn't put up any upfront capital costs, which I see as the biggest barrier to solar. Instead, they just agree to purchase electricity that we generate from that system, and they get to do so at a locked-in rate, which is a discount to what they're paying today. And they get to hedge that price for 15 or 20 years, which is pretty much impossible to do in the energy space. So we've been at it, rolling out throughout the Northeast and on various rooftops, and it's proven to be a pretty popular model.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm co-founder and chief product officer of Songkick. Songkick is a live music startup. Basically what we do is we send you personalized concert alerts when your favorite bands are in town. And the way that works is you tell us which bands you want to see, whether that's by installing our app on your phone and we look at all the music on your device, or you tell us your Pandora profile, your Last.fm profile, your Facebook likes, and we then send you personalized concert alerts. And we're now the second largest live music website after Ticketmaster in terms of traffic, and we're on Android, iOS, and Spotify.
Hi, I'm Cheryl. I'm the COO and co-founder of Sherpaa, and we're a health startup. So essentially what we do is we provide 24/7 email and phone access to doctors who solve employee problems over the phone or over email. And essentially what we're trying to do is just make healthcare accessible and affordable, which is often impossible or seemingly impossible. And that's what we're trying to do. So we've been around for about a year, and starting in New York and just pushing forward.
So in each of these, you guys have started companies in these very different areas, ranging from solar to concerts to healthcare. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting as a commonality between your 3 companies is that in the case of the solar company, it was much more of a financial services innovation than a solar innovation. You know, in the case of the concert application, it was much more about a matching algorithm than actually putting on concerts, right? And then in the case of healthcare, it's not actually a new procedure, a new way of administering healthcare. It was more the experience of healthcare. And so in all 3 cases, it was focusing on delivering a really good user experience, and that seemed to be the focus, almost independently of what industry you were in or what you needed to implement to get to that good experience. So what I think would be really interesting for the audience to hear is, how did you come up with that initial insight about the opportunity that your company had at hand? How'd you pursue that?
Sure. I kind of come at this, and I kind of always have. Maybe it's my upbringing or something, but from this perspective that, and I don't normally say this when I present, but that at a fundamental level, I believe that people want to do the right thing, and specifically, very focused on the environment. I believe everybody wants to make responsible environmental choices. But we have all of these very meaningful barriers that prevent us from being able to, whether it's, an energy manager is incentivized on his annual bonus based on how much did he reduce the electricity costs that year. So then you're looking at, okay, well, ask that guy to push forward in a Fortune 50 company a initiative to invest in what's longer than a 5-year payback. It's, the guy's a good guy, he wants to do that, but he's got other things to consider. And so, that's the perspective I came at it with. I was working in the clean tech space, and specifically in air quality and energy regulations in California, more from actually a litigation standpoint, and saw this, huge challenge, trying to clean up the air, and all of these traditional sources of energy were fighting the new regulations, but there was this vast network of distribution facilities throughout the Central Valley, these huge rooftops, and on these very long drives through the Central Valley, I'm thinking every day, why isn't there solar on there? Why isn't there solar? And so, I talked with some people about technology and thought about commercializing some technologies that had the potential to reduce costs. But then the more I thought about it, it just didn't seem like that was the challenge. That it's just, we're a country that's built on financial solutions. If you want a big screen TV, you have the option to make monthly payments, and you don't have that for solar. And it's this tremendous opportunity to, provide domestic generation and stabilize energy costs, but you just have that one issue. And so came at it from that angle and said, I'm going to go to business school and work on this plan, and ended up having the opportunity to kind of go through an incubator class and get to actually, flesh out all of the pieces and run through different ways to address that. That was kind of the initial seed.
I guess the original idea for Songkick really came out of a pain that my co-founders and I had personally. We're huge music fans. At the time, we were spending a lot of time looking at MySpace, subscribing to million different band email lists and Ticketmaster email lists and venue email lists, and just spending a lot of time trying to find out when concerts were happening, and we were still missing out on the bands we really wanted to see live. And so when we started talking about starting a company together and applying to Y Combinator, the original idea was I just wish that I only got told about the concerts I want to go to for the bands I want to see live. So if there's this thing that could just scan my iTunes library, that would be awesome, because that's exactly who I want to see live. But actually, I think that the idea isn't the important part. It's about executing on the idea. I mean, when we first started researching, like, okay, let's do this thing, and oh my God, there's 3 other startups doing the same thing. Shit, should we just stop now because somebody else has done it? And it doesn't actually matter, because it's your execution that will ultimately matter.
So for us, our company started actually with a story. My co-founder is actually a doctor, and a gentleman had emailed him, a friend of ours, with what sounded like classic appendicitis. Just he was having belly pains, and he sent the email. Jay took a look at it and said, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is appendicitis. Forwarded that email along to a surgeon who's now in our group of doctors. He said, yep, this sounds like appendicitis. Send him right over. Sent the gentleman over to Dr. Goldstein's office, took a CAT scan, absolutely appendicitis, and said, let's set him up in my outpatient surgical center, which is 2 blocks from my office. 3 hours later, after laparoscopically removing this guy's appendix, sent him home on oral antibiotics. So in the scope of about 6 hours between the guy initially emailing Jay, who's my co-founder, he was back home minus an appendix. So we thought there's definitely a business here. What's also amazing about this on sort of the back end is that Dr. Goldstein, when he works out of the hospital in New York that shall remain nameless, that he typically works out of, that procedure is $115,000 is what he bills for that, of which he sees $1,000. In this scenario, he billed $63,000 and saw 2/3 of it. So in this scenario, the patient had an amazing experience, never stepped foot in an ER, never stepped foot in a hospital. We saved the insurance companies a ton of money, and we got Evan to make more money than he would normally. So again, what we're really trying to do is say there's so much waste in the healthcare system for a variety of reasons, whether it's the insurance companies or the hospitals. Is there a way that we can bridge the gap between the accessibility and the affordability? And there's concierge care where people are spending tons of money to be able to have somebody on call, but we don't think that should just be for the rich. We think that should be for everybody. And where we sort of flipped everything on its head is saying who profits from health. We know insurance companies and hospitals profit from sickness, but who actually profits from health? And it's the employers. Companies want happy, healthy employees that are there to work for them and stay healthy forever. So that's really where we started to say this is a service that we can pitch to companies where we can all feel good about it because we're profiting from health, not sickness, and we're actually, making people's lives easier.
So something that's also, I think, a theme for a lot of you is that you're operating in areas that have a lot of competition. The energy space is the largest market in the world. There's lots of people who are passionate about music, and the healthcare space is catching up to the energy space, right, in terms of overall size. So how, as a startup, do you continue to pursue that innovative vision effectively when there are so many players, small, medium, and large, that are sometimes maybe even going after the same idea? Like you mentioned with Songkick, you looked around like, oh, my goodness, there are a bunch of other companies that are going for the same thing. So how did you stake out a brand for yourself at Songkick, for instance?
I think it's all about kind of believing that you can do it better than what exists out there. So we took a look at the other competitors, started using all their services and felt like it still wasn't doing as good of a job as we wanted it to be done. So it's really believing that you have something more to offer beyond what's out there, I think.
Was that more of a gut call or metrics that you said, nobody's got the metrics that make sense?
I think at that stage when you're first starting out and you're seeing the existing landscape, it's just a gut feel. Like you feel like this isn't really solving my problem in the way that I want it to be solved, so I'm going to go out there and do it. And as you're growing, then it's a matter of, we're outpacing our competitors, we're growing beyond them, we're seeing more success, and we want to keep going with what we set out to do.
So I get that you had a lot of energy to be better than your competitors, to outwork and outsmart your competitors, but how did you focus that energy on actually constructively moving the market forward and becoming a leader?
I think for us, I'm a product person, so it was really about boiling down the problem we were solving for our users and figuring out, okay, the one sentence proposition is track your favorite artists and get concert alerts, and actually focusing on that and making sure that's all you're doing and getting your users to that experience within their first 30 seconds of using your product is really, really hard, but that's what we did. We tested 1 million times. We made sure that your import was really quick and you could get personalized concerts the first 30 seconds that you land on our site, and figuring out that was the magical experience for our users was what really got us more and more success. So it was really identifying that as our core proposition and then making sure that everything we built was centered around that.
In the case of Sherpaa, there's obviously a lot of people in the healthcare space. There's even a lot of startups that are starting to go after the healthcare space. How do you differentiate? How do you figure out what that kind of distilled essence of what's awesome about Sherpaa is and go after that faster than anyone else?
I think we're lucky because the healthcare space is just such a disaster that there's so much opportunity out there. And we love, I don't really see so many people as being competitors to us. Everybody's trying to solve a part of this gigantic problem. And so we work with a lot of other startups, whether it's apps that are trying to keep people healthy through, checking your exercise and make it into a game or whatever, we're into that. ZocDoc, we love them. We think it's great. If you can, book appointments online, fantastic. So we sort of see it as we're all tackling pieces of this huge problem. For us, we really felt that making it so that it's not impossible to figure out what kind of doctor you need and get your problem solved quickly and easily, that's kind of the path we're going on, and to make it affordable. And there's not a ton of people in that space, unfortunately, right now, but we're hoping that there will be. And we're basically, the way that we view it is just we're all trying to solve a piece of this giant puzzle.
And how would you define Sherpaa's piece? Like,
Accessibility and affordability. I mean, we're really just trying to say that there's, when you have a problem, very often, especially in sort of the younger demographic and people that are doing startups, they don't even have primary care physicians. So they're going to the ER when they have a problem, which is a problem for the country at large. So what we're trying to say is there's got to be a better way. We have to be able to provide that guidance for people in a way that they can feel comfortable and not feel like they're going to be spending tons and tons of money, and just make every part of healthcare, whether it's understanding your insurance plan, make it really accessible to people so that they don't feel like it's this foreign language and I'm actually just not going to go to the doctor ever until I'm in dire need because it's all just way too confusing and too much, which we see a lot. So that was sort of where we wanted to be in. Yeah.
and Vanessa, in terms of Soltage, how do you operate and innovate and grow in a space that's so large and has so many competitors? How do you distill what Soltage is and represents and stay ahead of everyone else who's in that space?
It's a good question. I think actually we could use more competition. When we got started, there were one or two other companies coming at this from a similar angle. Now there's quite a bit more. But at that time, they were one in California, we're based in New Jersey, one in the South. And so when we were cold calling clients, we're explaining this whole concept. They've looked into solar, maybe. They probably haven't. First, what is solar? How does it work? Second, you don't have to pay for this, and explaining the whole structure. So we're spending quite a lot of time explaining the model and how it works, and then working through a contracting structure which is not unique, but was unique in the distributed generation space. And so, a whole new structure. Now, when we do have competition on sales, then it's just down to, how fast can you execute, quality of the installation, financeability, how quick can you finance this, because that is the challenge, and how much can you optimize the incentives, so what's the bottom line, what's your price, and so for us, because the U.S. doesn't have a federal level energy policy for renewables, that's the driving force. The demand pull function is the state policies or the state dynamics. They're prevailing energy rates. In some states we're competitive already with prevailing rates with no state subsidies. But in other states, we work very closely with and track the state policies so that we can very efficiently monetize whatever's out there to kind of take that final leap to get from a good economic offer to one that's below their current cost, because that's when somebody's going to sign up. And so that's, that's really where we pride ourselves in the expertise. We work very closely with policy, and then also on the tax side and the financial structures, being able to be nimble enough and set up our financial structures so that we can adjust to the structures which we know will change. That's one thing we know. And so being able to set up the process in our business model, which is still based on the same thesis, but the mechanics of it, have to be flexible enough to change. And so that's where we differentiate.
Given the degree to which it is a financial services play, are you worried about a large hedge fund or a bank sweeping in and being able to, more directly finance more customers and just, outcompete you? Or how are you going to outcompete the big guys?
So there's, like all energy, it's largely tax credit or tax based. That may be news, but that's an important part of any energy finance. So we kind of look to the tax equity markets as that's the most limited source, and this is basically companies with net income that they need to offset to effectively manage their operations. There's about last year about 160 billion in tax equity, and our space needs, between wind and solar, and need about 20. So that's not the issue. The issue is getting those potential investors. There's a few banks who are knowledgeable about this kind of structure. They've been doing it in other space like affordable housing and so forth, but it's a new asset class, or they have dealt with this asset class but under different structures, and so it's getting them capable and set up to go through the diligence and the closing process and be set up. So there's a huge untapped market there. So that's a fun part, is bringing new investors into the space, and we've just opened up that possibility also for private investors, which is personally very exciting to me because we've always been asked, well, this is a diversified investment, and it's a really cool one, and so we go through the qualifications, and you need this kind of passive loss, and very specific tax requirements, and so people that want to invest in solar can't, and so now we've separated out some of those attributes. So we've got the tax investors and then cash investors, and so that opens it up to a whole new world.
So speaking about how investors open things up, I know that a lot of people in this room are really interested in investment and the impact of investment. And Songkick got a pretty substantial investment this year from Sequoia. So, I mean, a lot of people would be really delighted to go and pull down a $300,000, $400,000 round, and you guys pulled down a $10 million round from leading venture capitalists. So, first off, bravo on that. And then, secondly, how has that impacted your ability to execute and your innovation, your plans for the business, to have that kind of capital resource available to your company?
I would say that every investment comes with raising the stakes of what you're trying to achieve. Every round you take on, you have to bring on a return for those investors, and so your ambition level is raised automatically. In our experience with bringing Sequoia on board, it's just really the amazing advice that they give us. They've been on the board of Google, Apple, Airbnb, like so many amazing companies, and they've seen companies scale through these early times when you're still searching for your business model out to, being a multi-billion-dollar business. And Greg, who sits on our board, is also on the board of Airbnb, and just the advice he's given us around like how you're scaling your team or how you should be thinking of your business model, that's just been completely unparalleled. So I would say it's more around them being able to tell us, like, here are the different steps and phases of a business and how they evolve, and here's where you are and where we think you'll go and where do you think you're going to go, and that's just been the best part about bringing them on board, I would say.
Was there any real impact from the cash as is, or is almost all of the impact just on an advisory basis?
Well, I mean, it's nice to have cash and not worry about runway for a few years, and we completely invest in our team, so it's gone out to hiring really great people and continuing to do that. And we managed to keep our burn pretty low, so it's just about having more time to do what we want to do and really forcing us to think a lot bigger on what we want to achieve.
And what do you think it was about Songkick's vision or current progress or potential that got Sequoia excited enough to cut you a check for $10 million?
You'd have to ask our CEO that, who does all the pitching, but I was there in the room. I think actually what you said about waste and inefficiency is a really, really good one. So the live music market is a $40 billion industry. It hasn't changed really since the advent of online ticketing, which was in the 90s, and there's been no real structural shift since then. And if you look at the touring and live music industry, there is so much inefficiency and waste. And actually, one of the kind of new programs that we're running at Songkick, which is still in experimental phase, we just started talking about it, which we're calling Detour, is where we're allowing artists to crowdfund their tour dates. So currently, the way that stuff happens is there's an agent and there's a local promoter and there's a lot of old school relationships, and that's how they decide where to go. But in this new world of streaming music, artists are building their international fan base instantly, and they don't know where to go. And we know.
Song Kickstarter?
No, no, we're calling it Detour, actually. Yeah, Song Kickstarter, Kickstart Box. Yeah, no. But it's really exciting. I mean, it's an exciting time to allow technology to come and bring, solve the problems that relationships and old school way of doing things can't do. And I mean, we're in a really great place to do that because we have millions of users, we know where they live, we know what bands they listen to, we know who they want to see, and we can just take that to the band and say, we think you should go to Stockholm, why don't you put it out there and see if your fans will pay for you to go there. And that just completely de-risks it for the artists. They're not playing to half-empty venues, promoters don't have to upfront cash that they lose out on. It's a win-win all around.
So it sounds like you're using technology insights to effectively attack a otherwise relatively static industry of tours.
Yeah.
In the healthcare industry, what's going on there? I mean, are we seeing sweeping changes? Is a lot of the insight behind what makes Sherpaa possible something that's on a technology basis or on a regulatory basis, or like what?
Yeah, I think what's interesting for us about the technology is all of the technology that we're building is actually the back end to help the doctors. I think it's kind of amazing for anybody that goes to their doctor. You notice that they write everything down, and we're moving to electronic medical records, but it's ridiculous that we're just starting to do this in 2012. So it's really difficult to get doctors on board with technology. So for us, a huge piece of what we're doing is making the back end really user-friendly for our doctors to be able to share medical records as necessary, to be able to communicate with our clients, to send reminders, hey, don't forget to take this pill with food. How do you feel 3 days after you came in and had the flu or whatever? So from a technology point of view, I think that's more on the doctor side of things. I think for us, the insurance side of things is really where we kind of get the employers in initially. It is incredibly confusing. It's something you pretty much legally have to offer to your employees. And if you're starting a business, it is absolutely the least sexy and last thing you want to be thinking about. So bad choices are often made all around. So we're trying to sort of take a consultative approach to help them navigate through that. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to offer this 24/7, access to doctors.
Awesome. And just to close out the panel here, if I could have just even 30 seconds of thoughts from each of you about where you see your respective industries going. So like, where is the healthcare industry going?
Yeah, I think, doctors are going to be retiring that are in the baby boom age, and I think more people that are younger are going to be coming up, and I'm really hopeful that it's going to be a much more advanced and interesting industry than it is now, because it has to be. It has to catch up to the way everything else is done. Doctors right now don't get paid for, answering emails, so they just don't. That's why you're always going in to talk to your doctor, and I don't think that that's something that can sustain. So this industry is going to have to catch up, and I think that just means everybody's going to be better for it. I think it's exciting. It's a really exciting time.
I think the way any creative industry is going forward is technology and the web and social media allows creators and their fan base and their audience to connect a lot more quickly and more efficiently. And what we're hoping to do is really make that into concerts, turn that into shows where people are playing in front of their fans in the right places, in more places than they would have before. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
I think in the U.S. solar industry, different than the global, we're going to see just tremendous growth in especially the distributed space, also the utility space, but and that's actually rolling out of the solar panels, you know, on land, on rooftops, and so forth. And so that's there's so many ways to optimize that further. Our costs of installing, just the installation, forget the equipment, in the U.S. are still about 30–40% higher than in Germany, which is scaled up to a fully mature market, highly competitive. So there's design efficiencies, there's sales efficiencies, there's permitting efficiencies, there's contracting and legal efficiencies, and you know, there are so many business models and so many ways to optimize the development and the execution and so forth. And that's a huge opportunity. And then also integrating with that you know, we see, especially in the Northeast, the strain on the infrastructure that's set up, you know, the grid infrastructure, the power lines and transformers and so forth has been highlighted a few times, like a few weeks ago when nobody had power and things like this, and hospitals were impacted. And the thing is, that's all expected. Those are known issues, and there's also opportunities there because the business model hasn't made sense before, but now there's new solutions. There's growth, and you know, there's improvement in battery technologies. Those are almost commercially viable to actually address some of these challenges. And then just in the rate structures and so forth, you know, you can make improvements in the infrastructure, and the time is now. And I think that that's going to be noticed more and more.
Thank you so much. Let's give it up for our amazing panelists.